Hello all and welcome. I know people are still logging in, but I'm going to go ahead and start us off with some housekeeping notes. So this presentation is being recorded. It will run about 60 minutes and there will be some Q&A time at the end. So what we encourage you to do is please submit your questions through the question and answer panel throughout the session, and then use upvoting to upvote your peers' questions. Also, feel free to start chatting with your peers in our chat function, but if you have questions for the panelists, please put them in the Q&A panel. Also, as an FYI, you can listen to the webinar through your computer or dialing in through the phone using the passcode provided by Zoom. You will receive 1 hour of CE for this session, and you will receive that information via email about a week after this webinar. Finally, we want to invite you to use the closed captioning function for this webinar. If you need it, click on the CC button at the bottom of your screen, and you'll find a link to the subtitles. So welcome to the webinar. I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Amy Calvert, Events Industry Council CEO. Welcome, Amy.
Thanks, Liz. And thank you to all of our participants today. It's so great to see everybody logging on and to see the tremendous support for this session. I think it's super important. I want to thank our esteemed panelists for making time for this conversation today. You know, one of the things, we know this has been an extremely disruptive and really challenging time for so many of our friends and colleagues that we know and love in this industry, and yet I'm inspired by the collaboration and the unity that we continue to see across the globe. And I think that's one of the things that is really a significant indicator for our industry's future and our resilience. And so I'm encouraged, and I'm continuing to commit to all of you that that is sort of our guidepost as we go forward and think about that which we can deliver to help our industry through this time and to ensure a really relevant future. So today's conversation is all around advocacy and how we as individuals can get really involved in the conversation as part of our own personal commitment to telling the industry's best story, the value of the industry, you know, not only the economic impact, but certainly the social impact and the way we know business events really contribute to the societies and the communities that we serve. And I think that's a really important part of this. You know, and one of the key takeaways I hope for all of you today is that you see how these various industry leaders and these organizations are coming together during this time to work collaboratively and align around key priorities to everybody's collective well-being. So, and then, you know, there'll be a call to action at the end, and this is an ongoing conversation. And the other thing that I hope everyone takes away from today's conversation, that the role of advocacy is not just in times of crisis. It's really, you know, one of the learnings for me has been that, you know, we need to have a united approach on an ongoing basis around telling our best story. And so I'm looking forward to spending time with you. Again, I'm grateful for all of our participants making time for this program today and to our panelists. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my dear friend, Elliot Ferguson. Thank you, Elliot, for offering your time and expertise as our moderator today. I know you'll do a fantastic job, and I know you bring a unique perspective, not only as president and CEO of Destination DC, but as the current chair of the U.S. Travel Association. So, Elliot, take it away, my friend.
All right. Good morning or good afternoon to everyone. It's good to see folks that are tuning in from all over the world. And Amy, I am impressed with your glamour shot that you had up there. You look good. No one's stressing anymore. I always have the option of putting on a shirt with a collar or not, and I just mostly choose not to. But I'm here, and you know, this is an important topic. And you know, let's face it. You know, what's the definition of an advocate? It's someone who's really focusing on the needs of an organization or a specific topic, and that's what this is all about. You know, right now we're all dealing with the obvious, which is the pandemic and the reoccurring issues in the United States. For those that are tuning in from a global perspective, we know what you all are seeing because we're living it, and we're keeping our fingers crossed as I'm talking to my peers from around the country in terms of how we're trying to recover. I mean, I think right now it's almost like driving down the street blindfolded in terms of budgets and our futures and what should we be focusing on as we look towards the future. So advocacy clearly plays a huge role in at least trying to do all we can to focus on key things that are important, such as meetings coming back on track and other things that are important to us as well. I mean, across the events ecosystem, various coalitions, associations, and initiatives are working diligently to ensure that voices are amplified on a regular basis to really tell our stories, and by helping government officials to understand the relevance of tourism and meetings in our industry, and the importance of what we do on a regular basis. In a city like Washington, you think it's automatic that our elected officials understand what happens when visitors or conventions come to a city. I can assure you right now they do. And for those of you that are in the DMV, DC, Maryland, and Virginia area, you know exactly what I'm talking about. We all have a role in ensuring that outside of our industry, people truly understand the impact of what we do in terms of creating jobs and economic stimulus for communities. And with the right tools and resources and guidance from the various advocacy groups, there are a lot of efforts that are underway to make sure that those voices are amplified. So the question is, what is our goal? Gain a greater understanding of the global events industry advocates initiatives and efforts currently underway. Learn how to access the tools and resources that you can customize and utilize in your own advocacy efforts, and access updated campaign and policy efforts for COVID relief, which is extremely important to all of us. And with that, we're very fortunate to have a myriad of experience of individuals that are on the call today from a global perspective. I'll go down the list and give you some insight. I won't read the entire bios on each person because we really want to get to the questions. Everyone knows David Audrain with CISO, 27 years of exhibition management experience in many different markets. And we all understand what CISO does, as well as Go Live together. Thank you, David, for being with us today. We also have Kathy Breeden, Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer of IAEE and CEO for the Center for Exhibition and Industry Research. For over 30 years, CEIR has been highlighting the importance of exhibitions in today's business environment, and their goal is to promote the image and valued growth of exhibitions. Kathy, thanks for being here with us today. We all know Mary Kate Cunningham, Vice President of Public Policy for ASAE right here in DC. She serves as the VP, and in that role, she oversees federal, state, and local advocacy efforts on behalf of the 47,000 trade associations globally, and specifically in the U.S., including efforts and things that are right in our own backyard. So thanks, Mary Kate, for being with us. Kai Hattendorf with UFI, the Global Association of Exhibition Industry, is the Managing Director and CEO. Executive management with long-term track record of successful strategic as well as organizational business transformations in various industries. So we're happy to have Kai here with us. Thanks for joining. Brad Main, President and CEO of IAVM, International Association of Venue Managers. They focus on peak performers in sports, entertainment, and meeting industry, and have an award-winning track record in creating and maintaining companies, designing, finance, and managing major sports and entertainment entities, and the list goes on and on with what Brad does. So thanks, Brad. Karen Malone, Vice President of Healthcare Information and Management Systems Society. We all love to call it HIMSS. It's much easier. Karen is Vice President of Meetings and Services for HIMSS in North America, global-based organization that focuses on health through information and technology. She's been in this industry for 30 years and with HIMSS since 1997. We'd love to host their meeting in DC, but darn it, we're just too small. So we know that they do a series of meetings globally and domestically. Happy to have Karen here, and thank you, Karen, for being with us. Chris Keith with the Association of Event Organizers, managing highly motivated team who deliver on AEO's vision, carefully managing resources to drive product services which deliver their objectives. So thank you, Chris. And last but not least, Sue Sung, Vice President with Freeman Company. She has 20 years of experience in strategy consulting and is currently the head of corporate strategy for Freeman, and as well as so many other things that Sue does for this industry. So, and we all know Freeman and know what they do for our industry. So thank you very much for all of you for being here today with us. Chris, I'm going to start with you. What current legislation is being considered or announced in the UK that could affect our industry, and how can event professionals voice a unified message?
Good morning, afternoon or evening, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. In the UK, we literally on Monday of this week had published our guidance, which is applicable to Britain, Northern Ireland, Wales and also Scotland. It's called All Secure. And it is a global standard that was created by a number of organisers as an open source document that we've actually then applied and put into tune for the national regulations in the UK. So covering our health and safety executive and other rules and regulations that were in place. So we have in the UK the All Secure document, and it's a framework that covers sort of 4 cornerstones. So hygiene, protect and detect, communication, and elements about data. There's sort of 4 cornerstones that it all looks at. So that's something that we've been working on for many weeks. It's been with the government for 6 weeks waiting for approval, which we've been eagerly waiting for. And then 6 days ago, our Prime Minister announced that we were going to be open for business, but threw in the curveball that we were going to have to follow some pilots. So we had a 4-phase approach to responding to COVID. So we wanted to have a hand on the pen writing the guidance. So using some global terminology and applying it nationally was really key. We had a priority to get the go dates, of course, to build customer confidence in terms of when we can go forward. We had a priority now of the pilots to make sure that they effectively demonstrate all the control measures that we have in place and all the mitigation measures to prove that it's safe to do such. And the final area, which we've been running all the way through, is something called Project Confidence. So we need to remind our customers and our visitors not only of the safe environments that we create, but also the value in which they get from attending, to generating trade, learning, all those different elements as well there. So that's sort of where we are at the moment. It's been 5 months of hell, but fortunately we have only really had one UK government to try and influence. I can talk about how we did that later, but it's been a journey. I know you guys in the US have got a lot more governments to go for, and Germany has a number of states and federations to go for, so I've only had one, and that's been hard enough. So my heart bleeds for all of you guys trying to influence everybody else.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chris. And I think sometimes we're always curious as to what the global perspective of what's happening in the U.S. Or how we're dealing with the pandemic in the U.S. It's good to see that you all are getting back on track, and I think we have a lot to learn from the global community, and hopefully we'll be able to catch up, because we're still living the hell, and hopefully you all will continue to move in the right direction. So Mary Kate, your role clearly is extremely important to ASAE and the industry as a whole. We understand you have to have a clear understanding of the value and importance of advocacy and programs for driving change. For many event programs and professionals and organizations, this is kind of a new area, and it would be helpful if you can provide an overview of what makes for an effective advocacy program, and where are we with the U.S. in terms of legislation. I know you can talk about that for about an hour. So Mary Kate.
Yeah, thank you so much, Elliot. So they say with advocacy, if you're not at the table, then you're on the menu. And I think that's definitely true, but what happens when it's a virtual table? So when you can't actually go to the Hill anymore and talk to folks at a reception, or have your lobbyists do that, I think it's been a really interesting environment. But at the same time, these grassroots portals that now we're able to use to get all of our messages to the Hill and on social media to the Hill are more powerful than ever. So having a strong message and everyone singing off the same song sheet is so important. They also say in advocacy, everyone thinks they have their problem is unique, but they're actually not. They're very common. So if you can get all of your advocates on the same message. And also, I think what's something to consider is when we're all being part of advocacy campaigns, sending messages through an advocacy portal, the staff on the Hill are more overwhelmed than ever with these messages. So how do you get through the noise? How do you share your story in a way that differentiates it between 1,000 form emails that a staffer, or to be honest, an intern receives? So that's something really to consider. The more you can personalize your message, the more effective it will be. The more data you have about the economic impact of an issue, the better. We've been surveying our members more than ever to try to get what's the percentage of people who think they don't have the reserves to cover these cancellation costs. How many people are really close to being insolvent? So I think just acknowledging that there's so much clutter, so personal relationships and constituents matter more than ever. And in terms of what is going on in the Hill now, we are expecting to see more substantive of a draft in the next day. We saw kind of a top-line view from Senator McConnell. There was a negotiation between the Senate Republicans and the White House. Now I think we're at the beginning of the actual congressional negotiation between Republicans and Democrats. So we've been trying to shore up support in the House and the Senate for expansion of the Paycheck Protection Program to 501c6 organizations. I know that's important to a lot of people on the call. We've been trying to explain to Congress how critical this is, how so many organizations are really in dire need. And we've also been very supportive of the Pandemic Risk Insurance Act, which is a risk insurance program that was started to be floated in March and was introduced in May. And this would cover business interruption and event cancellation in the wake of a pandemic. And if it would go into effect, then it would start in January. And we know how close, how the cancellation of in-person meetings and conferences has been so difficult for so many people. From ASAE Research Foundation surveys, we, from a group of about 500 nonprofit executives, we saw that 80% of respondents thought they would face at least 50% in loss of revenue. So it's a tough time, but thank you for all those who've been advocating to the Hill through Go Live and all of our other coalitions. And the work is not over. I think we're going to be into August till we see what actually happens next.
Thanks, Mary Kate. So you made a very valid point. There's a July 31st deadline, and the general sense is they're going to wait until after the deadline to then start getting into the weeds of getting stuff done, which is different than the last two iterations, whereas there seemingly was bipartisan support. Are you optimistic? We realize that there are elections that are coming up, so the Republican Party and Democrat Party, but especially the Republican Party, is looking at this through a different lens. Are we optimistic at all that they're going to really move in a direction that's positive for our industry?
I think there's a lot of understanding on the Hill of these issues. We saw that Leader McCarthy in the House, when he sent his priorities over to the Senate, he included expansion to C6 organizations of the Paycheck Protection Program. When we talked to Speaker Pelosi's staff, they said they've heard from all their members of Congress how critical this was. So your voice was really, people heard it. We saw more advocacy than ever, really starting in March. I think that you can, after the 2016 election, I've exited the prediction business, but I think that there's a good chance. If I were McConnell, I would not want to send home vulnerable people about to go to elections without a bill. But Congress loves a deadline because they don't want to go to the negotiation table without one. So I think the Democratic Convention could be a deadline. We have some members who want to go to that convention. But it's really, I think, it will be down to the wire on this. So still weighing in with your elected officials is really critical.
All right, we're keeping our fingers crossed on this one because it is extremely critical and very important to this industry. And speaking of Go Live Together Coalition, David, we all know you wear several hats. And in my notes, it said I could ask you anything, but I'll keep to the script. And as we're looking at all the needs within our industry, as a show organizer, and now serving as the chair of Go Live Together Coalition, you're looking through many lenses right now. And what do you see as the priorities for effective advocacy? And can you share a bit more of how it has affected shows, realizing that very few shows have happened since the pandemic?
Thanks, Elliot. Well, first of all, I'm not actually chair of Go Live. I'm part of the governance council that manages its activities. But very quickly, yes, I serve as executive director of CISO because I'm also a past chair of CISO and IAE, and my partner and I own a show organizing business. So I'm one of the organizers out there that's actually had to cancel 8 of his 11 events that were scheduled for this year. So I feel the pain quite acutely. Then Go Live came about through an initiative that was started by Freeman, and Freeman put an enormous amount of resource, including Sue, who really has been directing the day-to-day efforts, and I'll let her talk about the advocacy efforts as we go forward. But the industry really came behind Go Live Together very quickly. There's literally hundreds and thousands of entities that are supporting the initiative, but the main alphabet soup that many represented here on the call really came together with it. And Freeman came to us at CISO and came to our leadership to support it financially as well. And CISO took the primary lead in raising the funds, of which we have already raised $500,000 to facilitate the advocacy efforts that we're putting forward. You go down the list and it's CISO, it's IAE, it's SEER, it's EDPA, it's ESCA, it's ASAE, it's MPI, it's PCMA. These are all associations that have supported financially the efforts that are going forward. We've contracted with one of the top lobbying firms in DC to help work with all of the industry, and that includes the advocacy efforts that ASAE and IAVM and others that are already doing there, to make sure that there is a consistent message and a supported message across the industry as we go forward. We've also brought a top communications firm, many know MDG, and they're helping with all of the communications and PR language that we're putting out there. So everything comes out from Go Live. But really, the focus of Go Live is to consolidate the messaging, consolidate a lot of the activities, and bring together the whole umbrella of the industry under one. And that involves EIC, it involves everybody here working specifically on the advocacy issues here in the US at this point.
Excellent. Thanks for that information. It's important work that you all are doing, and Go Live is extremely important right now. You know, part of the question was, how has it affected shows? I'm kind of curious, in your environment, what is being discussed in terms of the future?
Well, I mean, first off, there is a future. I mean, for those of you, my partner is, as many of you know, is sort of the opposite side of me. I'm a very optimistic person. To me, the glass isn't half full, it's overflowing on most days. And Stephanie, my partner, the glass isn't half empty, it's been drained all the way down. So between us, we usually have a pretty fairly middle of the road perspective on business. But having had to cancel every event pretty much for this year since the middle of March, personally, we obviously are feeling it. I mean, discussions every day with our members from around the world, and there are some positive signs. I mean, here in the US, frankly, we are probably the least prepared right now around the globe of getting shows operating properly, and that's mainly due to, frankly, the lack of federal leadership and direction, and the various and different leadership and direction we're getting on a state and local level. And most importantly, because we have very, very poor access to testing. And we need, right now, you can't get on a plane and go many places here in the US unless you can prove you're negative. But you can't prove you're negative because you can't get a test unless you're sick. And you can, even if you can get a test because you're already sick, you can't get a result for 6, 8, 10 days. So all of that means that basically we sort of throw our hands up and say, well, what's the point in trying to get on a plane? So that needs to get in under control. Yeah. And what we are seeing from a positive perspective is we're seeing shows in Asia, we're seeing major shows in China, Thailand, Korea, all having been successfully and safely operated in the last few weeks. And we're seeing, and Kai will talk about Europe in a minute, I'm sure, we're seeing some very positive signs of show activity there too. So following that sort of flow from Asia to Europe to the US, we can hope that we will get our act together over here from a federal perspective and be able to actually have shows safely in various parts of the country, certainly by the fourth quarter of this year is our hope. Wow.
I hope you're right, my friend. We're all looking forward to a stronger fourth quarter of 2020, or at least 2020 coming to an end. So Kathy, let's just face it, IAEE has really been a long-standing champion for our industry and understanding, poaching and piracy and privacy and things like that. What are some of the current initiatives that are underway to support our industry and specifically exhibitions, and how can event professionals get involved?
thank you very much, Elliot. You know, back to 2011, when Gary Sain, the CEO, the former CEO of Visit Orlando, was on our board of directors, and after the Great Recession, he said that, you know, exhibitions need to have a voice in Washington, D.C., and really push the board to form the Exhibitions Mean Business campaign. And the whole purpose of the campaign was and is still to really be able to educate our congressional representatives on the importance of both B2B exhibitions as well as consumer events. And over the years, I mean, we've advocated for many different things, including in 2015, there was the issue of a government meeting being held in Las Vegas, and the government prohibited, you know, all government employees from attending any meeting. So we went in and began educating Congress on the importance of government officials being able to attend. You know, just think of the healthcare officials that are working in government and were not able to attend. We've also advocated on behalf of the Secure Traveler Program, which some of you may know as the Visa Waiver Program. Sierra had done a study back in 2010 that showed that the economic impact of foreign travelers not being able to come into the United States to conduct business was absolutely substantial. You know, it really was a great impact in opening the eyes. And one of the things that we've accomplished is that in 2014, we started Exhibitions Day, an annual visit on the Hill, early June, always the first Wednesday in June, and really being able to educate just what the exhibitions industry is and its economic impact and its value. And over the years, we've been going in to visit, these individuals and their legislative staffs. They come to know us. They come to expect us coming into their offices. So I think that we've made, good strides there. And then in terms of, the poaching issue, the hotel poaching issue, we were really, really hopeful that this year was going to be the year. There was a House bill that had been introduced, as well as a Senate bill. We've been talking with Senator Kane's office, and really were hopeful. And then, of course, COVID happened, and that didn't work out. But certainly there were over 15 million fraudulent bookings caused by these companies. The International Poultry and Egg Association was successful in suing, was able to get $750,000 judgment. The likelihood of them ever collecting that money is very low, but at least now, we have precedent. Then, of course, the other issue is the list poaching, which is something else, where companies are coming in and using the show's name and acting as if they are, an official provider, which they are not. Pack Expo just received a positive judgment against a company that was doing that against, and trademark infringement. So hoping that next year we'll be able to get back to that type of issue, those types of issues, and we can set aside, what's occurring now. And in terms of what we're doing now, it's all about supporting the Go Live Together initiative. It's supporting ASAE and the Paycheck Protection Program. IAEE is a 501c6 organization, so we would certainly benefit from the passage of that as well. So we are pushing out, the call to actions, sometimes on a weekly basis, twice weekly basis, to our members here in the U.S., encouraging them to follow up on those specific calls to action, and really working together with all of the different industry organizations to make sure that our messages are being amplified. And by now, I'm sure that our congressional representatives really know who we are.
Yeah. Very, very good points, Kathy. And I saw that one of the messages that came through was the quote that was made years ago that you're not going to Vegas on the government dime. And we remember how negative that was on the economy in Vegas. Fortunately, we did see some changes within the administration that understood, because of lobbying, because of the efforts of folks on this call, and of course U.S. Travel Association, we saw a favorable outcome. You know, those were such fixable things and mistakes that our industry learned from and elected officials learned from. You know, and that's so different. You know, when you really compare that to where we are now, it's like, wow, we wish we had fixable things. But it's important in terms of what everyone is doing to move us to the next position as we get out of COVID one day and are able to look back on this and say, God forbid something like this ever happen again that really is so negatively impactful on our industry. So
yeah, I think that we are so much better positioned now, right? I had said that, you know, the recession, we were all caught off guard, and it took us a while to get our act together. And, you know, certainly this also happened, and I think it's taken us a while to get our act together. But hopefully, whatever that next crisis is, that, you know, we've built such great relationships across all of these industry organizations that we'll be well prepared to respond to it very quickly.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Kathy. So Kai, you know, one of the areas that we'd like to see awareness, to raise awareness with policymakers is the legacy impact of the events industry and the importance that it has on global recovery. From a global perspective, I'm sure you can give us some insight, but also how can we better communicate our value as an industry to policymakers to improve their understanding of what we bring to the table? Kind of ties into what Kathy said, but love to hear your perspective.
Thank you, first of all, and I can't wait to be in DC in 2026 for the World Cup, by the way. I'm going back to the city where I did my master's, so count me in on that. We have to, it's been said before, we have to find a voice as an industry, and then we can speak different dialects because we are the business events industry and there are different interests in different subsegments and different narratives to tell, but we have to sing, as was said, from the same hymn sheet. We need the same voice. We need to not go and ask them to save our industry. Every industry goes and says, save us, we are important. We have to show what we bring and that we are part of the solution, not just another problem that they have to deal with. Stephen Carter, David, I think it was on the CISO town hall, said governments don't like solutions that are industry specific. They like economic benefits and they like the multiplicity of things. So the legacy is a vital element to take to add to the narrative and to bring to the equation. We have to get the license to operate back, and then we have to deliver events that help rebuild economies, that help rebuilding societies. And that needs a couple of things. It needs, first of all, it does need frameworks. It needs contexts on a global level that will never be implemented on the global level because that's the wrong level. Because there's local legislation that is about putting things into place. It is about the local implementation and local decisions. But that narrative needs to be driven by a context. And we are all familiar now with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, for instance. A clear set of goals, a framework again, that offers so many buy-ins for governments, institutions, players. So this is what this looks like for the events industry. The strategic advantage in economic recovery and renewal. It's all in the resources later for you. So these 15 icons, there's something for every politician to be re-elected. So we can catch their attention. We can show the value of our industry. It's one narrative, different voices. And what we then need to show them is to build on the success stories. This is China, this side we're on. This is China a few weeks ago, the first show that took place there again. Being implemented in accordance with security and safety standards that we've put together on the global level, that are then backed by organizers, venue suppliers. They're certified by institutions like GBAC. And then we can prove that the events can run safely and that there are no infections. So, and that builds then the trust in the politicians and the policymakers that, well, heck, if the Germans have done it, so can we. If the Chinese are doing it, so can we. So let's get back to business. Back to you, Elliot.
Very good point. I would say that, you know, as we're looking at the dynamics of the global pandemic, you know, this is usually we're disrupted by economics. We're disrupted by politicians making stupid statements or erroneous statements. Maybe that's a nicer way of putting it. And we've had situations whereas medicine and pandemics have played a role, but never in this vein since really 1918. So, I think now more than ever, as we're looking at recovery and we're looking at the impact of what we're dealing with, there'll be an opportunity from a global perspective to learn. I'm hoping that we are going to learn as to what's happening in Europe and what's happening in Asia, and maybe have some best practices. And we're relying on folks like you and everyone on this call to be a part of that conversation, because the biggest fear is that, 18 months from now, hopefully we'll be back to normal, if not sooner, and we'll be talking about what a hellacious year 2020 was without really focusing on how can we manage these dynamics differently. So
I fully agree. And why did it work for Germany? Why are we being heard in Europe on the European Commission level? Because advocacy it's kind of an insurance fee you have to pay. It's an insurance activity. If you go away when there's no crisis, you need to catch up when there is a crisis. Right. Go live together is amazing. And we've been supporting from the UFI side from day one. We're one of the founding partners. But we've had a bureau in Brussels for years. So we sent a letter to the European Commission before this kind of long 4-day summit that they were now holding to discuss what to do with 750 billion euros. Right. And one of the things at one time it's on the table of a working group was our paper. And you have to invest in good times to be well positioned for the bad times. And that's the learning from this. This is kind of our industry's flu shot for the next pandemic.
Yep. I hope we've learned some valuable lessons in terms of what you just said. So Brad, IAVM has been collaboratively and working closely with GBAC to develop safety standards for the industry, something that we're all focusing on for a variety of reasons. How can this be an important tool for supporting advocacy efforts in the future?
Yeah, thank you, Elliot. And first I want to say thank you to many people on this panel. The collaboration has been incredible. All of us working together as one, as it's been talked about multiple times. That has been a silver lining in this is everybody, going to our legislators and trying to get relief, protection, stimulus dollars, et cetera, and educating them as to who our industry is and the economic engines that we are. But, as venue managers, we tend to get granular. So I've been asked to talk about the GBAC accreditation. When the pandemic hit, one of the things that we knew that biohazard sanitation was going to be very important. So we started searching. My hat's off to Rick Simon with executive, what's the magazine? I apologize. The show exhibition.
Trade show executive.
Trade show executive. Thank you. You can tell I'm an arena and a stadium guy, but I've been doing much more work with convention centers, and that's who I'm representing today. But also, Go Live Together has adopted this. We're getting good movement within the industry. We've got American Airlines is going with GBAC. We've got the Hyatt Corporation is going with GBAC. We have 4 destinations that are going with GBAC, and this is something that was announced May 7th. The portal for application actually was in the first or second week of June. We currently have more than 40 venues who are either accredited at this point or are going through it. 4 destinations that are doing the same thing. GBAC is an advisory council. It's part of ISSA, which is the Sanitation Association, been around for 100 years. The GBAC council is made up of scientists. These are individuals who have worked for CDC, WHO. They've done a lot of work in healthcare, hospitals, testing labs, and the like. And this is all driven specifically by scientists. The other thing we did is we reached out to the Infectious Disease Society of America and asked them to look over our shoulder with all their epidemiologists, which Count Fauci is one of their members. So we wanted to make sure that we were doing it right and that we were very specific. This is somewhat similar to LEED certification. There are 20 points in the accreditation that you have to answer. We put together a GBAC COVID-19 working group that is being led as co-chairs with Frank Poe from Georgia World Congress Center, Brett Mitchell from Overland Park, as you can see, a larger venue and a smaller venue to make sure that we were representing all of our venues. We're running this through the stadiums, arenas, performing arts centers as well, but obviously talking about convention centers. The certification ends up being a third party, so this is not something that our venues create and say, trust us. This creates a high level of trust, especially now that every single day additional organizations are going through and getting their certification. What's great about this program is it not only trains the individuals with sanitation, it also has resources available to them to let them know what chemicals and what processes are successful in eradicating biohazard items, not just the COVID-19, but all other viruses that are out there. So we're excited that we created that partnership. We sat down with John with ISSA, created all of the protocols to move forward as it relates to the venues and the hospitality industry. Supporters on this call, CISO, IAEE, Go Live Together. You know, it's been amazing. EIC has worked with us on the Apex Council that they've put together. Again, the collaboration has been incredible.
Wow, that's a lot. For those who may not be aware, GBAC is Global Biorisk Advisory Council. Thank you for giving us some insight as to what you're working on. It's extremely important. And, you know, venue managers here in DC, clearly we have large venues that need to be a part of the conversation. And one of the comments that came through is that we speak to ourselves as an industry, but not to mainstream media in terms of things that are happening within our industry and changes. I'm kind of curious, you know, Brett, I know I'm talking to you, and Karen, I'm going to throw the next question at you, but does anyone else feel that way? And if you do you feel like as we're looking at getting out of this COVID right now, that there's an opportunity for us to really focus on a future, whereas we're really talking to mainstream media about the importance of the industry and the things we've learned? That's for anyone, but Brad, if you want to answer it.
Yeah, let me start. Yes, some of these coalitions have done op-eds in major newspapers and magazines and the like, journals. We've put together a social media program where we have individuals that are talking about the challenges that we're facing, the fact that our quasi-government entities are enterprise funds, which means if they don't host events, revenue's not coming in. The fact that it's not only hurting the economy in the communities that we serve, but also it's hurting individuals as well as companies. You know, I think that's one thing that Congress is beginning to understand is we have an ecosystem that needs a lot of different organizations to be involved with specific expertise, and that these organizations are in the same boat as the venues are. If the events are not taking place, there's no revenue coming in. So it's major process there. So we are reaching out to the media. We've got several of our members have actually had great articles written. Little Rock, Arkansas, Senator Bozeman got 18 senators to sign on to a bill for us as it relates to PPP. And I know everybody else is doing the same thing.
Awesome. David, I saw your hand.
Yeah, and just to follow on what Brad said, one of the things we've been very focused on with Go Live is trying to get the message out that it's not about the trade show industry, it's about all the industries. You can't name an industry sector that isn't served by the events and exhibitions industry. And within that, every one of those, the vast majority, sometimes 80, 90% or more, are small businesses within those communities. And so we're trying to get the message out that it's not that unlike a lot of things, the trade show industry doesn't have events for the sake of having events. We serve markets, we serve industry sectors. And every time we run a trade show, small businesses get business. They grow, they survive, they thrive. And that's what we're trying to get through to them, is that we're a tool, we're a facilitator of business growth. So every investment and support for the exhibitions industry is actually supporting every industry sector that we serve.
Right. Yeah, a very, very valid point. And I think the key thing for us, and I think I saw your hand, is that we need to be, we always are chastised for not telling our own story well enough, and we need to make sure that we focus on that when we take a breath, try to catch up, that we also have a strategy tied to delivering that message. Kai, were you going to say something?
Exactly. We are an invisible giant as an industry. We are the facilitator for everyone else. So that's all part of the hymn sheet of the story, of the narrative we have to put out. Yeah. And we are getting there as an industry. I saw one or two questions on the chat. What can the average event industry professional do? Is stand tall, stand proud, and say what you do. We do not all organize weddings. An event manager is not just about weddings and festivals. And no, we can't get anybody a ticket for the next U2 gig or for the World Cup in 26. But we are doing so many different things. And we have to come together, and we have to campaign together. Globally, we do that with a campaign called Global Exhibitions Day that we have been doing for a number of years. Normally, we do physical events. This year, we were forced to do digital. We reached 715 million people because around the world, thousands of exhibitions and events industry professionals did something on that day that was noticed in their communities. We reached more people than watched Neil Armstrong, as it's the anniversary again, Neil Armstrong setting foot on the moon.
Awesome.
That's the power of the people in this industry when we come together to make our point.
That's right, and we've got to do a better job of telling that story. So Karen, you're the customer on the call. You're the one you're the coveted customer that everybody wants business. But you also happen to be the chair of Apex COVID-19, which I made the comment earlier. It's like putting on a blindfold and driving down the street. We all know how dangerous that is. So it's got to be tough for you, and you're in a recovery working group addressing policy and advocacy. What have been some of your key learnings, and how can organizations such as yours be more engaged in aligning with industry efforts? And then I'm going to end by asking you, what are you doing in lieu of probably meeting in person to communicate to your significant audience that you have on an annual basis?
Yeah, thanks, Elliot. And Mary Kate had commented earlier about the status of the legislation around the PPP and tax credits for exhibitors and attendees, and that's really, really important to us. But we've really been focused on the PREA Act, specifically the Pandemic Risk Insurance Act. It's something that our government relations staff, we're fortunate to have at HIMSS, has been working with ASAE and Go Live together on. And I think this is something that as show organizers we can all appreciate the importance of. Well, first of all, it was interesting to hear that probably less than 10% of all events had proper pandemic insurance coverage in place. So that is a big issue. And with the PREA Act, there's a big gap between what the insurance companies are willing in industry to support and what the government has in the PREA Act bill. It's part of a stopgap measure, even though they've got hundreds of billions of dollars. And even though we've had calls with senators and some legislators, they're not quite ready to jump on the bandwagon of handing all that money over to the events industry. So I think that as show organizers, we need to rally together because, show organizers have told me that their organization just cannot sustain another canceled event if they don't have proper insurance in place. So they need those financial assurances, and the insurance companies are saying, well, they're either not going to provide the insurance or make it available to us, or it's going to be extraordinarily expensive and just out of reach. And therefore, we're going to see meetings and shows reduced in number and size and scope, which is everyone has alluded to, is going to impact so many people worldwide. So what I would recommend is we really need show organizers to rally behind everything everyone has been saying. And Elliot, you made a great pitch in the beginning. We've got on our legislative center, we've been working with Go Live Together. We've got the HIMSS Legislative Action Center that's helping to host and support this a letter writing campaign and a tweets campaign to send information to all of your legislators, your congressmen and women and senators about the impact and the value and the dollars and data of your meetings to various regions in their communities so that they really get behind and support, not only the PPP and the tax credits, but also some kind of insurance measure so that we can all feel better for next year.
Excellent.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then regarding what are we doing moving forward, we're doing just like everyone else, digital. We're doing a lot of digital programs. We're doing digital globally and digital domestically in the United States. And we launched a HIMSS 20 digital program. We were in a very unfortunate, someone said to me, we had a worst case scenario. Our event canceled March 5th, right before the pandemic was declared. We saw it coming through an evidence-based advisory board that we had. So we had to cancel in a very unfortunate way because so much of our show was already put up, frankly. So it was very, very difficult for us. But we went ahead and deployed a virtual meeting within 3 to 4 weeks of canceling that event, and we've had a lot of success with that. And we're continuing to deploy virtual meetings throughout the year. And then we are looking at changing our dates for next year, frankly, from the spring to the summer, just be in anticipation of trying to make sure therapeutics and a vaccination are well established.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing. Chris, I see your hand, but before I go to you, I definitely want to give Sue a chance to weigh in, and then I'm going to get right back to you, Chris. So Sue, thank goodness for Freeman and for their resources and understanding the importance of what's next. And we've talked about Go Live Together Coalition, and I know that you play a huge role in the Go Live Together Coalition. Can you share an overview of the coalition itself?
Yeah, happy to. Sorry, great questions coming in. I apologize. There's some landscaping going on behind us, but I think this is what we all deal with. That, children and pets in a Zoom world. So I'll try to go quickly. When Freeman had done some limited advocacy on our own headed into the CARES Act. Subsequent to that, we were hopeful at the time that CARES would be sufficient, few weeks, maybe a couple months. We'd all get through this together, and we needed to focus on recovery. And so we really started to go live together with an eye towards recovery. Obviously, as the pandemic has continued to evolve, not only in the United States and globally, we've had to shift gears a little bit, being flexible, being nimble. So a couple things in terms of our legislative priorities. Somebody had asked, what are we asking you to support? So two things. One is, as we're waiting to see what this next package from the Senate comes out, we want to be as nimble as possible to tuck in where we can with existing legislation to ensure that business events and those businesses in our industry are covered. So we've had a lot of discussions about that, Brad, talking about the quasi-governmental, so instead of introducing something different than PPP, making sure that PPP extends to 501c6s as well as C3s as well as the quasi-government. So that's number one. It's very tactical. It's very near term. We've got 3 weeks to influence these legislators. To Kai's point, I'm having conversations with offices who have, bills just introduced that they have been working on for months, and sometimes years. So that's first and foremost, just because in the interest of time. What we are asking for specifically as Go Live Coalition, our number one priority are temporary tax credits to incent participation back to live business events. So that is specifically for attendees and exhibitors to get them back. For a couple of reasons. One, we know that health and safety is going to be critical. That's one of the number one things that come up on all the sentiment surveys that I've seen. That's the work that Brad is working on. We also have a health and safety guidelines document that's posted on the Go Live site summarizing, just consolidating all the great guidelines that have already been issued. But really the point we're trying to make there is we are controlled gatherings. We are not mass gatherings. We are not recreational. This is not for leisure. This is a critical sales and marketing channel to transact commerce. So that's on the health and safety side. The tax credit, even though it's a business events participation tax credit, as David said, this is really a small business stimulus bill. When you take a look at some of the data that suggests 46% of small businesses participate in an event in a given year. 80% of the exhibitors are small businesses. You know, the average expenditure to attend is somewhere between $40,000 and $60,000. When small businesses are coming out, and we know it's an effective channel for them, if they're not given this added tax incentive, if they're not given the cash to support, they're going to have to make some tough choices between rent, payroll, and investing in their future growth. That's going to put them behind for years to come. And so one of the things we're really trying to communicate to legislators is this is not a one-for-one, certainly not for the industry, and certainly not for the economic recovery for next year. We're talking about downstream years of growth that could be dampened if these businesses aren't given some support to help them get back to being able to participate in live business events.
Awesome, Sue. Thank you very much. And I know there are going to be a lot of questions, and for those who are interested in learning more, I'm sure that there will be a link in terms of what's happening with Go Live Together Coalition, that folks will be able to learn a little bit more about it and become more actively involved. I see Amy has just reappeared because we've got 2 minutes. Chris, I know I owe you a message, a comment, but before I go to Chris, I did want to give you some insight as to some of the things that U.S. Travel Association is doing. And to summarize it, it's basically everything that has been referenced so far by all the speakers are things in which we're focusing on, or the U.S. Travel Association is focusing on, in terms of recovery. I know that this is a global conversation, but let's just face it, we all need each other, and hopefully we'll learn from this and we'll be more proactive in terms of working with our elected officials and doing things that are important to our industry and for our industry overall. The key thing for us right now is getting back on track, getting some incentives in place for the leisure market and for the meetings industry to be able to have credits to get back in the business of having meetings. If you want additional information, you go to the U.S. Travel website and you can learn more on that. Before I turn it to Amy, Chris, real quickly to you.
Very good. I just thought I'd share just a couple of turning points on the success for us getting a go date. So the advocacy campaigns are brilliant and need to keep the pressure up. But what we were able to do, and the letters to MPs from members, so that overall noise is really important. But we switched our messaging. When the economic argument didn't work, we then started to talk about jobs. When jobs didn't work, we then actually went really targeted and went mainstream media. So we found a live example, a human interest story, and were able to articulate for it. It was the Southampton Boat Show, didn't get a license because the government wouldn't give a go date. £24 million worth of economic impact to the hotels around Southampton. 430 exhibitors, of which 80% were SMEs, 70% of their turnover done during the 10 days of the show that they won't get. And finally, one exhibitor, 15% of their annual turnover that they can't get back. They're making 20% redundancies within their business, and that impacted their onward supply chain. So that human interest story, that direct impact is where I think we need to go with our advocacy going forward. As everyone's eloquently said, we serve markets, and if we can get intelligence on those markets and those impacts, that was the change. And Boris was really, really annoyed that we'd lost the boat show because they couldn't give a date. And that was tied in with stuff in the Financial Times and things like that. So I think I'm trying to say advocacy, it's the big messages are important, but pick a moment in time. So Southampton Boat Show cancelled, in the mainstream press, get the human interest story and go for the jugular. And that accelerated the government's timetable for the reopening and reissue of guidance for us. Harder for you guys, I do appreciate it all, but those are the pivotal moments over the last sort of 5 months that we found, and that all happened in the last 9 days. It's been a whirlwind, but we're nearly there.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that, Chris. Amy, back to you, my friend.
Thank you, Elliot, and thank you to all of our amazing panelists. What a fantastic conversation. I really think it speaks to the heart of, what we're trying to accomplish as a group, as a unified coalition, and I hope that message to the audience, to our participants, came across loud and clear. This is an example of, what we talk about, borderless solidarity. Now more than ever, we really are a part of a global community, and we need to recognize that and think that way. And at the end of the day, I agree with everyone wholeheartedly. Those of us that have worked in cities understand that we have fantastic data, but until we can humanize that story and really speak to how it impacts an individual to a policymaker, we're not going to capture the hearts and minds of the people that can positively impact our industry. So today, I hope you leave here feeling empowered and inspired to really become part of this effort. There is a sense of urgency around what's happening here right now, but there's an opportunity and there's room for everybody as part of this conversation on an ongoing basis. At the conclusion of this program, all participants will receive a summary of information that our panelists have shared. There is a call to action through the Go Live Coalition that we'll be speaking to you more about through social channels and so forth. But again, please stay connected with us. Stay active in this conversation, and we look forward to continuing great work together on behalf of this global industry and our workforce of over 26 million individuals. They need us now more than ever. So be well, everyone. Thank you very much for your time, and we will be in touch soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Elliot.
Welcome. Have a good day, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Stay safe.
Thank you. Stay safe.
Bye.